Hi there, it's Natalie. Yeah, it's been a while since I've done a video, isn't it? So I think it's 3 months according to YouTube, so this is my now standard apology for not having done one for a while. I've been quite busy with one or two things, nothing massively exciting actually, but yeah, finished a couple of things off, and yeah, I had a few ideas. I didn't really feel like doing one for a while, but now here we are. So yeah, and I suppose by way of a quick update. So I suppose the main thing that I've been dealing with for the last I suppose 3 months is getting finalising the buying my ex out of my house, which now see around me is now my house. So yeah, for those that don't know, and I'm not sure why you wouldn't know because you probably found this from Twitter, in which case you've probably seen me tweet about it a lot. But yeah, so before I transitioned, my partner and I lived here, and she moved out, and so I was going through the process of buying this out. And obviously now that's finished, that's kind of a bit of closure of that period, which is cool. Obviously that's taken by, I suppose, because of various reasons and not necessarily rushing things. It's taken a couple of years. But now this kind of feeds into what I wanted to talk about today, which is the whole piece around dating, which is interesting. It's interesting anyway, and frankly, if you're trans, it's kind of triply so. If I'm honest, I find a lot of what's already out there with regard to dating for trans people, particularly trans women, obviously, is I find it a bit frustrating because a lot of what you find, blogs, vlogs, or stuff in general media where it exists, is things which is mainly made by cis-passing trans people, and obviously their experiences are a certain way. There are difficulties that cis-passing trans people have that people like me or the majority of trans people who aren't cis-passing all the time. There's problems they have that we don't have. There's problems that we have that they don't have, and it's only very much one side of the story. If it's not cis-passing trans people that's in the media, then quite often I find it's the sort of very sort of queer people who live in big cities. Their dating pool is bigger. There's the whole piece around, I suppose, that people who aren't very kind of cis-normative, heteronormative tend to move away from the kind of countryside areas, and here obviously isn't countryside. It's very, very urban, but it's suburban, I suppose, actually. It's a lot, I'm going to say, harder in places like this, and I suppose I'll come on to some of that later. But yeah, it's quite frustrating to see that the narrative in these blogs and vlogs and so on is all around, when do you disclose that you're trans? Do you do it after the first date, after a couple of dates, all that kind of thing? Which is just not an issue that I'm ever likely to encounter, because people can tell quite quickly. And I'll come on to, I suppose, a bit about how I think that I handle that later. But the biggest thing that's frustrating is that that's portrayed as, or this portrayal of dating for trans people as difficult because you have to work out when to disclose to people. It's unhelpful because, well, I shouldn't say it's unhelpful. To some people that's useful, because to some people that is reality. But for most of us, I don't really think it is. There's no way I could go on 3 dates with someone and not tell them. I wouldn't need to tell them; they would know. Even if from a distance, sometimes now you can't tell. As soon as you get up close, you can tell, and of course, as soon as I speak, you can definitely tell. So that being portrayed as the big thing doesn't help me. The big thing for me is whether people will date trans women. And let's face it, for the majority of people, that's a big fat no. There is no way most people are ever considering that. And this is why actually I think the disclosure piece is a massive. It's missing the point, because frankly, all that if you are cis-passing and you don't disclose until a couple of dates in, all you're doing is moving the problem that I get on day 1 to day X, whatever. I really do not think that you are ever going to get someone who wouldn't date a trans woman if she said it up front, but would if they got to know her for 2 or 3 dates. And because I know that's the justification for why people generally do it. I really don't think it's going to make any difference, and I think it just causes unnecessary pain. I mean, it's not something I've ever experienced, but it just kind of doesn't chime with me. Of course, it's now 2016, so most people do their dating and so on through things like apps, websites, things like OkCupid, Tinder, which is great because that takes away the necessity of trying to physically find somebody locally, which is quite challenging, and of course tenfold if you're trans. If I talk about my experiences towards dating, it's usually going to be from that arena. And I suppose a good place to start with that is with what my experiences are, which is not a lot. So I guess that's kind of the first point about being trans, is it's actually ridiculously hard to find anyone to go on dates with, because the way I often tell it to people is most people are cis people don't want to go on dates with trans people because it's embarrassing, and there's enough cis people, so why would they choose to embarrass themselves by going on a date with a trans person? And that sounds horrible, but that's the way that they see it, and I guess that's not going to change in a hurry. So yeah, I've not had a lot of luck. I mean, I've been trying for a year or so, on and off, but mainly on various different dating sites, and I've had 2 dates, and one of those really wasn't a date. So, and I'm not exactly being picky, I don't think. I have no preference in terms of gender, so it could be any, and yeah, it's just really quite tricky to find anyone who's interested. Now, I guess my experience isn't necessarily indicative of most trans people's, because I guess I was never particularly good at dating beforehand. I have no idea what I'm doing, so I guess people that do have a bit of an advantage, but it does give rise to some interesting situations. Now, for example, I put on my profile that I'm trans, but you can't guarantee that people read that. And of course, in a picture, sometimes I'm not that obviously trans anymore, so you get the odd situation where people don't realise. So I always try to make some reference to it. In fact, I usually just explicitly ask, if it's conversation's gone on for a little while, I explicitly ask, have you read my profile? Are you okay with that? And at that point, a third to a half of people probably just never reply again, or a very small minority of people will say, oh yeah, I'm not interested now. Most of them just stop replying. And those that do, you then have to work out whether they don't mind you being trans or whether they are into that. And a lot of people have a problem with that, people who are into people being trans. I don't per se, because I don't think it's necessarily a fundamental issue. I think it could be an issue depending on how they behave about it. And yeah, in a lot of situations, people aren't very, they aren't very nice. They would, they see it as a fetish. They see it as something to be ashamed of, and something that they would, if they want to go on a date, they want to do it in their hotel room where nobody will see. It's not going to happen. And there is this stigma, I guess, as well around, but both ways, in fact. So there's an obvious stigma with regards to cis people, I guess particularly men, but not solely, dating trans people, again particularly trans women. But there is also a bit the other way. So certainly in the trans community, there is this stigma around tranny chasers, as they're called, and people are, I think there are two, as I said, there are 2 types. There are the people that are cool about it, and there are people that are not. And the people that are cool about it, I think it's alright. It's probably It's not for everyone, and it might have a limited shelf life for obvious reasons, but I wouldn't necessarily rule these people out automatically. So yes, that's online dating, and then of course you've got the problem of offline, which I have no experience of. I've never, in pre or post transition, frankly, really. I had my ex. We were friends first, and kind of got together that way. So I've never done the whole meeting someone randomly in a bar or pub or something, and it's unlikely to happen because around here I don't really go into bars or pubs around here because I'll probably get killed. So kind of avoid that. So I guess the offline piece is tricky because inevitably, the way I see it, if someone approaches me offline, which has only kind of happened once or twice in a club when, like, you know how it is in clubs when people just kind of appear from behind, and this is nothing to do with dating. I've assumed that they haven't realised I'm trans because otherwise they would not be doing that in front of potentially their friends. So that's a bad situation to begin with because at some point they're going to realise and they're probably going to react badly, so I tend to just avoid these situations altogether. And I've never really done the whole like trans club thing where you get people that go for that specific purpose, so I can't talk about that. But yeah, I guess the point I'm getting to is that it's quite hard, and it's a lot harder if you look obviously trans, because a person, particularly a man, can date a trans woman if they don't look trans, because they don't have to tell their friends, they don't have to tell their work colleagues that they're dating this trans person, and it's not as embarrassing. Whereas if they date me, they can't not tell them because it's obvious, and then they've got to deal with the old "oh, you're gay" thing, which is fun. So they just don't. And yeah, so it's hard, and I'll probably report back a bit more on this when I get some success. So fingers crossed. And yeah, my New Year's resolution for this year is to be positive about things. This probably didn't come across that way very much, but I'm going to try, and we'll see what happens. So thanks.